3 weeks into the siege, Louise stood in the hydroponics bay of New Tombaugh Station, watching the food production teams work among the growing towers that provided fresh vegetables for the colony. The bay hummed with activity, but she could see the strain on everyone's faces. Rationing had been implemented after the first week, and every calorie was now precious. "We're producing 80% of our normal food yield," reported Chief Agricultural Officer Dr. James Park, a thin man whose family had developed the original terraforming protocols for Pluto. "The power restrictions are affecting the growth cycles." Louise nodded grimly. The siege had forced them to carefully manage every resource. The alien fleet maintained their positions at the edge of sensor range, occasionally sending single ships to probe the human defenses. It was a war of nerves as much as firepower. "How long can we maintain current ration levels?" "Maybe 4 months, assuming no further reduction in power allocation." Louise's communication device chirped with an incoming message from Dr. Vasquez. "Captain, you need to see what we've discovered about the alien ships." 15 minutes later, Louise found herself in the xenobiology lab staring at a holographic reconstruction of one of the alien vessels they had destroyed. The detail was extraordinary. Dr. Vasquez had managed to map the internal structure based on debris analysis and sensor readings. "It's not just a ship," Dr. Vasquez explained, manipulating the display to show cross-sections. "It's an entire ecosystem. Look at these chambers. They're growing food, processing waste, even manufacturing new biomechanical components." Louise studied the organic compartments that lined the alien vessel's interior. "They're completely self-sufficient. More than that, each ship appears to be capable of reproducing. These structures here," she highlighted several spherical chambers, "are nurseries. They're growing new crew members during long voyages." The implications were staggering. Louise was looking at a civilization that had adapted completely to life in space, where ships weren't just vehicles but mobile habitats capable of sustaining themselves indefinitely. "Which means they can maintain this siege as long as they want," Louise said quietly. "Unless we find a way to disrupt their ecosystem," Dr. Vasquez replied. "I've been analyzing the biological agents we used in the last battle. The bacteria didn't just interfere with their mineral absorption, it fundamentally disrupted their symbiotic relationships." Marcus Chen entered the lab, looking exhausted. "Captain, we've received a communication from the alien fleet." Louise felt her heart skip. "They're talking to us?" "Not exactly. It's more like mathematics. Dr. Park from Linguistics thinks it might be a negotiation attempt." They moved to the communications center, where Lieutenant Kim had the alien transmission displayed on her screens. Instead of the haunting biological sounds from their first contact, this was pure mathematical notation projected as holographic symbols. "It's definitely a form of communication," Dr. Park confirmed. The linguistics officer was young but brilliant, one of the team that had developed protocols for potential alien contact. "The mathematical structures are consistent with trade negotiations or diplomatic proposals." Louise studied the flowing alien script. "Can you translate it?" "Partially. They're offering something in exchange for our departure from this system. But the exact terms..." Dr. Park shook his head. "Their conceptual framework is completely alien. They seem to think in terms of energy flows and biological cycles rather than territory or resources." "Show them our response," Louise ordered. Dr. Park activated the transmission system, sending a carefully crafted mathematical response that essentially meant, "We are willing to negotiate, but we require clarification of terms." The reply came within hours, and it changed everything. "Captain," Dr. Park called urgently. "They're not just offering us safe passage. They're offering to share their star harvesting technology." Louise stared at the translated communication. According to the aliens, they could provide humanity with the means to harness stellar energy directly from red giant stars, technology that would make them truly spacefaring. In exchange, they wanted humanity to evacuate the Pluto system within 1 standard year. "It's a generous offer," Commander Okafor said during the emergency leadership meeting. "More generous than we had any right to expect." Admiral Zhang, still commanding the damaged Kuiper, disagreed. It's a trap. They're offering us technology we can't possibly understand or maintain. We'd be dependent on them forever. Louise studied the technical specifications that the aliens had included with their offer. The star harvesting technology was beyond human comprehension, involving controlled manipulation of stellar magnetic fields and exotic matter states that humanity was centuries away from developing. Dr. Vasquez, could we actually use this technology? Theoretically, yes. But we need to completely rebuild our industrial base, retrain our entire technical workforce, and establish manufacturing facilities for materials that don't exist in nature. How long would that take? Assuming we had unlimited resources and no technological setbacks? Maybe 50 years. More realistically, over a century. Louise felt the weight of 40,000 lives pressing down on her. The alien offer would save humanity, but it would also make them dependent on an alien civilization that thought nothing of evicting entire species from their home systems. There's another issue, Marcus added quietly. The offer includes a map of suitable red giant systems within range of our current technology. Every single one is already inhabited. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The aliens weren't just offering humanity a new home, they were offering them the opportunity to become the evictors instead of the evicted. Ma'am, Lieutenant Kim called from the communications station. The aliens are requesting a response within 72 hours. Louise stood and walked to the observation window overlooking Pluto's ice plains. In the distance, she could see the lights of the civilian shelters where children who had never seen Earth were learning to prepare for evacuation from the only home they had ever known. 3 days to decide the future of our species, she said quietly. What are you thinking, Captain? Commander Okafor asked. Louise turned back to face the room. I'm thinking that maybe there's a third option. One the aliens haven't considered. Louise's plan was audacious in its simplicity, and terrifying in its implications. If humanity couldn't defeat the alien fleet directly, and couldn't accept their offer of dependent survival, then they would have to make the siege so costly that the aliens would abandon their star harvesting operation entirely. You're talking about turning Pluto into a weapon, Admiral Zhang said, his weathered face grim in the holographic display. The risks are acceptable compared to the alternatives, Louise finished. Dr. Vasquez, can it be done? The xenobiologist manipulated the technical display, showing Pluto's internal structure. Theoretically, yes. Pluto's core contains enough radioactive material to create a significant explosion if we can destabilize the natural decay process. But we're talking about cracking a planet, Captain. The energy release would be visible from Alpha Centauri. Chief Engineer Rodriguez leaned forward from his position at the engineering station. The bigger problem is timing. We need to make sure our people can get away before the cascade reaction reaches critical mass. Louise studied the calculations scrolling across the screen. The plan required precise coordination of Pluto's geothermal plants, the atmospheric processors, and every nuclear reactor on the planet. They would essentially turn their home into a delayed action bomb with a timer measured in days rather than minutes. How long do we have before the aliens grow impatient? Unknown, Marcus replied. But their last communication indicated they expect a response within 48 hours. After that, they may resume active hostilities. Commander Okafor spoke up from her position at the civilian coordination station. Captain, I have to ask, what about our people? Even if this plan works, we're talking about abandoning the only habitable world left in the system. Louise had been dreading this question. We load every ship we have with supplies and personnel. The fleet becomes our new home until we can reach another system. With what destination? Admiral Zhang asked. Our fastest ships can barely make interstellar distances with current life support capabilities. Dr. Vasquez brought up a stellar map on the main display. There is one possibility. The alien star maps show a red dwarf system approximately 12 light-years from here. No current inhabitants, and at least 3 planets in the habitable zone. 12 light-years? Rodriguez whispered. Even with our best ships, that's a 40-year journey. A generation ship, Louise said quietly. We turned the fleet into a nomadic civilization. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of what Louise was proposing. Humanity would become true children of space, carrying their entire civilization aboard a handful of ships traveling between the stars. "There's another problem," Marcus said, studying the tactical displays. "The aliens won't just let us leave. They'll follow us, or intercept us during the journey." Louise had already considered this. "That's where the second part of the plan comes in. We don't just evacuate, we make sure they can't follow." She activated the secondary display, showing the modified star harvesting technology that the aliens had shared in their negotiation attempt. "Dr. Vasquez, you said their technology works by manipulating stellar magnetic fields. What happens if we disrupt those fields?" Dr. Vasquez's eyes widened as she understood. "The red giant would become unstable. Potentially catastrophically so." "Exactly. We turn their prize into a trap. Let them try to harvest energy from a star that's about to go supernova." Admiral Zhang shook his head slowly. "Captain, you're talking about destroying an entire solar system. The moral implications are outweighed by the survival of our species," Louise replied firmly. "These aliens have shown they're willing to evict entire civilizations for their energy needs. We're just applying the same philosophy in reverse." "How would we accomplish stellar destabilization?" Rodriguez asked. Dr. Vasquez brought up the technical specifications of the alien star harvesting equipment. Their own technology could be repurposed. Instead of siphoning energy from the star's magnetic field, we could introduce chaotic resonances that would amplify the natural instabilities in the red giant's structure, triggering a premature supernova. Louise finished. The plan was coming together with horrible clarity. Humanity would evacuate to their improvised generation fleet, destabilize Pluto to prevent alien pursuit, and sabotage the red giant to ensure the aliens couldn't simply wait for them to die in interstellar space. "Timeline?" Louise asked. 40 hours to prepare the planetary charges," Rodriguez reported. "Another 12 hours to modify their star harvesting equipment for our purposes." "And the evacuation?" Commander Okafor consulted her civilian coordination displays. "We can get perhaps half the population aboard the available ships with basic life support. The rest..." She shrugged helplessly. Louise felt the weight of those 20,000 lives she would have to leave behind. "Double shift all available personnel on expanding ship capacity. Strip everything non-essential from the stations. We'll live like our ancestors did on the generation ships that first brought us to the outer system." "Ma'am," Lieutenant Kim called from the communications station. "The aliens are hailing us again." On screen, the flowing mathematical symbols appeared on the main display, but this time Dr. Park's translation was immediate. "They're demanding an immediate response to their offer. They're also detecting unusual energy readings from Pluto's surface." Louise smiled grimly. "Send them our counteroffer." Dr. Park's fingers flew over his console, translating Louise's words into the aliens' mathematical language. The message was simple and direct. "We reject your offer. Depart this system immediately or face the consequences." The alien response was equally direct. The mathematical symbols translated as a simple concept. "Compliance will be enforced. All ships, battle stations," Louise ordered. "Operation Exodus is now active. We have 40 hours to save our species." As alarms began sounding throughout New Tombaugh Station, Louise took one last look at the observation window showing Pluto's ice plains. Soon, this world that had been humanity's refuge would become their greatest weapon. The question was whether they could survive using it. The evacuation of Pluto proceeded with the desperate efficiency of a species fighting for survival. Louise moved through the corridors of New Tombaugh Station, watching families say goodbye to the only home their children had ever known. Personal belongings were abandoned in favor of critical supplies, medicine, tools, portable fusion reactors, genetic samples from Earth's biosphere. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez called as Louise passed the science section. "The modification to the alien star harvesting technology is complete. But there's something you need to know." Louise paused, noting the concern in the scientist's voice. "What is it?" "The stellar destabilization process. It's not reversible." Once we trigger the magnetic field disruption, the star will go supernova within 18 months. Maybe sooner. That's the point. You don't understand, Dr. Vasquez continued. The explosion will be visible across this entire region of the galaxy. Any space-faring civilization within 50 light-years will know that someone deliberately triggered a stellar collapse. Louise felt a chill of realization. We'll be announcing ourselves to the galaxy as a species willing to destroy stars. That could make us either feared or hunted, Dr. Vasquez said quietly. Possibly both. There was no time to debate the long-term implications. Louise could hear the sounds of the evacuation continuing around them, families being separated as ship capacity reached its limits, children crying as they were carried aboard vessels that would become their entire world for the next 4 decades. How many people can we save? Louise asked. Commander Okafor's voice came over the intercom system. Current estimates, 27,000 aboard the ships, maybe 3,000 more if we're willing to accept life support failures during the journey. 30,000 out of 40,000. Louise closed her eyes, trying not to think about the families that would be left behind. What about the volunteers staying behind? 8,000 so far. Scientists, engineers, defense personnel. They'll maintain the planetary weapon systems until the final moment. Louise made her way to the main hangar bay, where the organized chaos of evacuation was most visible. Civilians lined up at processing stations where they were assigned to specific ships based on skills and family groups. Children clutched toys and precious objects while their parents made impossible decisions about what to save from their lives. Ma'am, Chief Engineer Rodriguez approached, his hands stained with coolant from the reactor modifications. The planetary charges are in place and linked to the central control system. Once activated, we'll have approximately 6 hours before the cascade reaction becomes unstoppable. And the alien fleet? Still maintaining their siege positions. But they're showing signs of movement. I think they're preparing for another assault. Louise felt time pressing against her like a physical weight. How long until the ships are ready for departure? 12 hours for basic life support configuration. 24 for optimal safety margins. We may not have 24 hours. As if summoned by her words, Marcus Chen's voice echoed through the station's communications system. All hands, this is the bridge. Long-range sensors detect the alien fleet is moving into attack formation. Estimated time to weapons range, 6 hours. Louise grabbed the nearest communication panel. All department heads, immediate conference. Conference room 3. The meeting was brief and grim. The aliens had apparently decided that humanity's delay tactics had gone on long enough. They were preparing to take Pluto by force, probably planning to sort out the survivors later. We accelerate the timeline, Louise announced. Begin loading the ships immediately. Essential personnel only for the final 12 hours. Captain. Admiral Zhang's voice came through the holographic communication system. My ship is fully loaded and ready for departure. But we can't leave you behind. Louise had been dreading this moment. As fleet commander, tradition dictated that she be among the last to leave. But tradition assumed that evacuation was temporary, not the permanent abandonment of humanity's last world. Admiral, I'm transferring fleet command to you effective immediately. You'll lead the generation fleet to the new system. Louise. Zhang's weathered face showed the strain of too many losses. You can't stay. The fleet needs you. The fleet needs to survive, Louise replied. That's your responsibility now. Mine is to make sure the aliens pay too high a price to follow you. The argument continued for several minutes, but Louise's decision was final. She would remain with the volunteer force to oversee the final phase of Operation Exodus, the destruction of Pluto, and the destabilization of humanity's dying star. As the meeting dispersed, Marcus approached her. Captain, I'm staying too. The hell you are. You're needed on the fleet. With respect, ma'am, I'm needed here. Someone has to coordinate the defense while you manage the planetary weapon systems. Louise looked into his eyes and saw the same determination that had driven humanity across the galaxy in their flight from their dying star. How many others? Most of the senior staff, Dr. Vasquez, Chief Rodriguez, Commander Okafor. We've all decided that some things are more important than personal survival. Louise felt tears threatening at the edge of her vision. 8,000 volunteers to hold off an alien fleet while 30,000 escape. Those aren't good odds. They're the only odds we have, Marcus replied simply. Outside the conference room, the evacuation continued with increasing urgency. Louise could hear the whine of ship engines warming up, the hiss of atmospheric recyclers being tested, the voices of families saying goodbye across impossible distances. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Kim called from the communications station. "Admiral Zhang reports the first wave of ships is ready for departure. He's requesting permission to begin the exodus." Louise walked to the main observation window, looking out at the fleet of mismatched vessels that would carry humanity's future to the stars. Cargo haulers converted to passenger ships, mining vessels equipped with life support systems, the remaining warships of the defense fleet loaded with civilians instead of weapons. "Tell Admiral Zhang, tell him that humanity's greatest strength has always been our willingness to sacrifice for future generations. The people aboard those ships represent our hope. The people staying behind represent our defiance." She activated the fleet communication system, opening a channel to all ships simultaneously. "This is Captain Louise Meridian to all vessels of the Exodus fleet. You carry with you the dreams and memories of every human who ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. 40,000 years ago, our ancestors left Africa to populate the Earth. 200 years ago, we left Earth to populate the solar system. Today, you leave the solar system to populate the galaxy." Her voice carried across the communication channels to 30,000 souls preparing for a journey that would last generations. "Remember us not as the ones who stayed behind, but as the ones who chose to stand watch while you slept. The stars are calling you home. All ships," Admiral Zhang's voice replied, heavy with emotion. "This is the Exodus fleet. Beginning departure sequence. It has been an honor to serve with you all." One by one, the ships of humanity's last fleet ignited their engines and began the long acceleration out of Pluto's gravity well. Louise watched from the observation deck as the lights of 30,000 refugees disappeared into the starfield, carrying the future of human civilization toward an uncertain destiny 12 light-years away. Behind them, 8,000 volunteers prepared to make their last stand against an alien fleet that had already written off humanity as an acceptable loss. The siege of Pluto was about to become its final battle. The alien assault began at dawn on Pluto's longest day. Louise watched from the command center as 14 biomechanical ships descended from their siege positions like a school of predatory fish sensing wounded prey. Their hulls rippled with organic motion as they accelerated toward the planet's orbital defense grid. "All remaining fleet units, engage at maximum range," Louise ordered. The human fleet now consisted of just 4 ships. Admiral Zhang had left behind the most damaged vessels to help with the final defense. "Make every shot count." The space around Pluto erupted in weapons fire as the defensive platforms and remaining ships opened up with everything they had. Louise watched the tactical display as plasma torpedoes and particle beams reached out toward the alien formation, while the familiar blue beams of quantum dissolution reached back. "Direct hit on hostile number 3, Marcus reported. "The biological weapon is taking effect." But the aliens had learned from their previous encounters. Instead of allowing the infected sections to spread, they were immediately jettisoning any compromised hull segments. Biomechanical pods detached from the main vessels like discarded skin, creating a debris field of still-living alien technology. "They're adapting faster than we can hurt them," Dr. Vasquez observed from her science station. She had refused evacuation, claiming that someone needed to monitor the planetary weapon systems. Louise studied the tactical situation. 8 alien ships remained fully operational, while humanity's defense was down to 2 operational platforms and 3 ships. The mathematics were brutal and simple. "Initiate Lazarus Protocol for all remaining vessels," she ordered. "Ram attack on the lead ships." "Ma'am," came the voice of Captain Sarah Chin, commander of the corvette Karen's Rest. "It has been an honor serving under your command." Louise watched as the 3 remaining human ships accelerated toward the alien formation, their crews having already evacuated to life pods. The aliens tried to destroy them with quantum weapons, but the smaller vessels were fast and maneuverable. Karen's Rest struck the lead alien vessel amidships, her nuclear reactor detonating in a brilliant flash that Louise could see even from Pluto's surface. The explosion took both ships, but more importantly, it scattered biological weapons throughout the alien formation. Multiple hostiles showing signs of bacterial infection, Dr. Vasquez reported. Their formation is breaking up. But 6 alien ships still approached Pluto's orbital zone, and the quantum weapons were now targeting the planet's surface directly. Louise watched in horror as entire sections of New Tombaugh Station simply ceased to exist, erased from reality by weapons that treated matter as a suggestion rather than a law. All personnel to deep shelters, Louise ordered. Begin final countdown for planetary weapon systems. The volunteers who had remained behind scattered to reinforced bunkers as the alien bombardment intensified. Louise made her way to the primary control bunker, a heavily shielded facility built into Pluto's crust that housed the master controls for the planetary weapon. Countdown initiated, Chief Engineer Rodriguez reported. Cascade reaction will begin in T-4 hours. Louise settled into the command chair, watching the status displays that showed Pluto's geological systems being pushed beyond their design limits. Geothermal plants were overloading their containment systems, atmospheric processors were running at dangerous pressures, and every nuclear reactor on the planet was being reconfigured to contribute to the coming explosion. Dr. Vasquez, status on the star harvesting equipment? Modified alien technology is in position around the star. We can trigger the magnetic field disruption at any time. Louise studied the tactical display showing the remaining alien ships. They had begun landing troops on Pluto's surface, biomechanical creatures that moved with the same organic grace as their ships. Humanity's ground forces were putting up resistance, but it was clear that the aliens would reach the critical facilities within hours. "Ma'am," Marcus called from the tactical station. "We're receiving a communication from the alien fleet." "Put it through." The familiar mathematical symbols appeared on the display, but this time the translation was immediate and chilling. "Surrender now and your death will be quick." Louise smiled grimly. "Send them our response." Marcus translated her words into the alien mathematical language. "We choose our own death." The countdown continued as the battle raged above and around them. Louise could hear the impacts of the alien assault through the thick walls of the bunker, the quantum weapons carving through Pluto's crust like a knife through flesh, the sound of human resistance growing weaker as defensive positions were overrun. T-1 hour to cascade reaction, Rodriguez reported. "All systems are approaching critical thresholds. Any word from the Exodus fleet?" Admiral Zhang reports successful acceleration to interstellar velocity, Lieutenant Kim replied. "They're beyond the range of the stellar explosion." Louise felt a moment of profound relief. Whatever happened in the next hour, humanity's future was secure. The 30,000 souls aboard the Generation fleet would reach their new home, carrying with them the accumulated knowledge and culture of their species. T-30 minutes, Rodriguez announced. Point of no return in 5 minutes. Louise looked around the bunker at the faces of her remaining crew. 8,000 volunteers had been reduced to perhaps 300 survivors in the deep shelters. They had held the line long enough for their people to escape, and now they would ensure that the aliens paid for their victory. "All stations, report final status. Planetary weapon systems nominal," Rodriguez replied. "Star harvesting equipment ready for magnetic disruption," Dr. Vasquez confirmed. "Communication systems operational," Lieutenant Kim reported. "Tactical systems maintaining target lock on alien fleet," Marcus added. Louise took a deep breath, thinking about her grandmother's stories of Earth's oceans, about Admiral Zhang's words about choosing between survival and honor, about the children aboard the Exodus fleet who would grow up among the stars. "Point of no return in 10 seconds, Rodriguez announced. Louise placed her hand on the activation control. "For humanity." She pressed the button. Deep within Pluto's core, The cascade reaction began. Radioactive materials that had been stable for billions of years suddenly found themselves in an environment where the laws of physics had been carefully bent. The reaction would take 6 hours to build to critical mass, but it was now unstoppable. Cascade reaction initiated, Rodriguez reported unnecessarily. Louise activated the communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies to ensure the aliens received her message. "This is Captain Louise Meridian of the Plutonian Defense Corps. You wanted our star. You can have it." She nodded to Dr. Vasquez, who activated the modified star harvesting equipment. 12 light minutes away, the ancient red giant that had once been Sol began to experience massive disruptions in its magnetic field. The carefully balanced forces that had maintained the star's stability for billions of years suddenly found themselves pushed into chaotic resonance. The alien response was immediate and panicked. The mathematical communications that flooded the airwaves translated as desperate questions. "What have you done? Stop this immediately!" Louise smiled as she watched the tactical display showing the alien ships beginning to retreat from Pluto's orbital zone. "Too late. You should have accepted our original negotiation. Leave us alone." The star harvesting equipment, designed to siphon energy from stellar magnetic fields, was now pumping chaotic energy back into the system. The red giant's surface began to show signs of instability, as massive solar flares erupted with increasing frequency. "Estimated time to stellar collapse?" Louise asked. 18 months, possibly less," Dr. Vasquez replied. "The magnetic field disruption is accelerating the natural instabilities in the star's structure." Louise activated the communication system one final time, broadcasting toward the fleeing alien fleet. "Consider this a lesson in the cost of evicting humanity. We may die, but we choose how we die. And we choose to take our star with us." The alien ships were accelerating away from the system now, their biomechanical hulls rippling with what Louise could only interpret as panic. They had come to harvest a star and found themselves facing a species willing to destroy it rather than hand it over. "T-5 hours to planetary detonation," Rodriguez announced. Louise settled back in her command chair, watching the tactical display as the alien fleet disappeared beyond sensor range. Around her, the 300 survivors of humanity's last stand waited quietly for the end. But it wasn't really an end, Louise realized. 12 light-years away, 30,000 humans were beginning a new chapter in their species' story. The children aboard those ships would grow up knowing that their ancestors had chosen defiance over surrender, had preferred destruction to defeat. The countdown continued, marking the final hours of humanity's presence in the solar system that had been their home for 200 years. When Pluto exploded, it would be visible from Earth's former orbit, a brief news star announcing to the galaxy that humanity had been here. And in 18 months, when the red giant finally collapsed into supernova, it would shine across this entire region of space as a beacon carrying a simple message: some species cannot be conquered, only destroyed. And sometimes, that destruction becomes its own kind of victory. Louise closed her eyes and waited for the stars to call her home. 43 years later, Captain Maria Chinocafor stood on the observation deck of the Generation ship New Earth, watching the red dwarf star grow larger in the viewport. At 35, she had been born during the Exodus, spending her entire life aboard the fleet that carried humanity's survivors toward their new home. The star ahead was smaller and cooler than the Sol they had left behind, but its planets showed promise. Spectroscopic analysis had confirmed water vapor, breathable atmospheres, and the absence of any intelligent life that might object to human colonization. "Captain," her first officer called from the bridge. "We're receiving a message from Admiral Zhang on the new Tomball." Maria made her way to the communications center, where the aged Admiral's holographic image awaited her. At 98, Zhang was one of the few survivors who remembered Pluto directly. His hair was white now, his face lined with the years of guiding humanity through the dark between stars. "Maria," he said, using the informal address he had earned through decades of leadership. "Long-range sensors have confirmed planetary conditions in the target system. We can begin colonization immediately upon arrival." Maria nodded, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. She was the granddaughter of Marcus Chin and Sarah Okafor, two of the heroes who had died in Pluto's defense. Her parents had raised her on stories of Captain Louise Meridian and the last stand that had saved humanity's future. "Any word from the other colonies?" she asked. Over the past 4 decades, humanity had split into 7 different fleets, each heading toward a different star system identified in the alien star maps. It was a deliberate strategy, spreading humanity across multiple worlds to ensure that no single catastrophe could destroy their entire species. "The Perseverance fleet reached Kepler 442 system last year," Zhang replied. "They report successful establishment of New Geneva colony. The other fleets are still in transit, but all report successful journey conditions." Maria studied the tactical display showing their new solar system. 3 planets orbited in the habitable zone, while asteroid belts and gas giants provided resources for industrial development. It was a fresh start for a species that had learned hard lessons about the cost of depending on a single world. "Admiral, what about the threat assessment?" Zhang's expression grew serious. "Our xenobiology teams have been monitoring galactic communications during the journey. The supernova that destroyed our original system was visible across this entire region of space. There's been chatter." Maria felt a familiar chill. During the journey, humanity had detected radio signals from at least 17 different alien civilizations within 50 light-years. Most seemed to be avoiding any system that had been associated with the species willing to destroy stars rather than surrender them. "They're afraid of us," she said. "Perhaps. Or perhaps they're simply cautious about a species that announces itself through stellar destruction." Zhang manipulated the display to show the expanding shell of radiation from Sol's supernova. "The explosion is still propagating outward. For the next 1,000 years, anyone within 100 light-years will be able to see what humanity did to our own star." It was a sobering thought. Humanity had gained a reputation as the species that preferred mutual destruction to defeat. It might protect them from would-be conquerors, but it also marked them as potentially dangerous neighbors. "Landing operations begin in 72 hours," Zhang continued. "You'll be leading the first colony ship to the second planet. We're calling it New Meridian, after Captain Louise." Maria felt tears threatening at the mention of the captain whose sacrifice had made this moment possible. She would have liked that. She would have liked knowing that her decision saved our species. The population aboard the 7 fleets now totals over 60,000 souls. Humanity will survive. As the communication ended, Maria returned to the observation deck, watching their new star grow brighter. Around her, she could see other ships of the fleet, converted cargo haulers, mining vessels, and the few remaining warships that had carried their people across the void. The journey had changed humanity in fundamental ways. They were no longer a planet-bound species dreaming of the stars. They were truly children of space, comfortable with the idea that home was wherever their ships happened to be. The generation ships had become cities, the fleets had become nations, and the galaxy had become their frontier. "Ma'am," her communications officer called. "We're receiving a transmission from the New Geneva colony." Maria activated the display, watching as the holographic image of Governor Sarah Martinez appeared. Martinez was one of the children born during the Exodus, now leading humanity's first successful interstellar colony. "Maria, congratulations on reaching your destination. New Geneva wants to share something with all the fleets." The display shifted to show a monument that had been built in the center of the colony's capital city. It was simple but powerful. A black stone obelisk with the names of the 8,000 volunteers who had died in Pluto's defense. At the top, larger than the others, was inscribed, "Captain Louise Meridian, she chose how we died so we could choose how we lived. Every colony will have one," Martinez continued, "so that our children remember the price of freedom." Maria nodded, thinking about the children who would be born on New Meridian, who would grow up under an alien star but still carry the memories of humanity's long journey from the world that had given them life. The red dwarf ahead continued to grow in the viewport, promising new worlds to explore, new challenges to overcome, and new chapters in humanity's story. They had lost their birth star, lost their first interstellar home, lost 8,000 heroes in their darkest hour. But they had gained something precious in return, the knowledge that humanity could not be conquered, only transformed. They were no longer the species that had crawled out of Earth's oceans to wonder at the stars. They were the species that had turned their dying star into a weapon, that had chosen the dark between worlds over surrender, that had scattered across the galaxy like seeds on an infinite wind. As the new Earth began its final approach to the world that would become humanity's new home, Maria thought about Captain Louise Meridian's last words. "The stars are calling you home." She had been right. The stars were home now, and humanity's children would inherit them all.